Yesterday, Battle Mode released and I played it non-stop. I'm absolutely in love with Battle Mode, but that's not what this video is about. It's about the Battle Mode patch, but not Battle Mode itself. The new patch brought with it two exciting card changes that fundamentally changed their respective cards. Number one was Leader, who went from being a 6-3 that would copy everything your opponent played everywhere. He went from being that to being a 6-7 on reveal, copy all cards your opponent played to the location right of here, but on your side. This is a very dramatic rework for the card, and I think it's going to take a long time to tell how good this new version of the card is. I don't think the card is buried. I think there is definitely a way to play this new card, but new card is the correct phrase. This is fundamentally a very, very, very different card than what old Leader was, so I think it's going to take some time to adjust to that. Number two is the card that we're going to be focusing on and talking about in this video, and that is Wolverine. Wolverine went from being a 2-3 that upon being destroyed or discarded would return to play at a random location. He was moved down to 2-2 with a brand new effect. When this is discarded or destroyed, regenerate it at a random location with +2 power. I've built a bit of a reputation for being the Galactus guy, so once this change was announced, I had quite a few people asking about the implications. Does this mean we run Wolverine in our Galactus decks now? Is he better than Sabretooth? For now, I think we don't run Wolverine, but the answer is significantly more complicated than that, so I wanted to dedicate an entire video to it rather than responding to people individually, and I'll be sure to let them know what I think once this video is out. But let me explain why I think Wolverine's change will be incredibly important for Galactus players once March rolls around. Currently, the traditional Galactus list play pattern is play a ramp card on turn 4 and play Galactus on turn 5, and then win the game with some combination of 2 to 3 cards. Since Galactus' release, I've considered this the best way to play Galactus if you want to win games. But I've also been very optimistic about future Galactus builds that aim to play Galactus on turn 6, because ideally, the later we play Galactus in the game, the better. Plus, if we were able to play a Galactus list that was consistent enough that we could play Galactus on turn 6, it means we wouldn't have to run any ramp cards. And currently, ramp cards take up 2 to 3 slots in the deck, which is a good percentage of the deck. The strategy would be fairly straightforward. We would run Goblins, we would run Shuri to make those Goblins even bigger, and then we would just play Galactus on 6. The tricky part is that we need to come up with 8 other cards that can be put into the deck. Black Widow could potentially work in that deck because she forces the opponent to quote-unquote fill some slots on their board. Magic in theory is good because we don't intend to Galactus until the final turn of the game, so we don't care about turning off Limbo. This strategy had 2 main flaws with it. One, what happens when we don't draw our Goblins? There are only 2 of the cards in the deck, so we need something to do when we don't draw them. And 2, if we do draw our Goblins, what if they have destruction effects like Carnage, Deathlock, or Destroyer? Well, recently, a new card was data mined. That card is Nimrod. Nimrod is a fantastic card, which I talked about in a video earlier in the week. I'll leave that linked at the end of this video and in the card. But to catch you up, he's a 5-5 that summons copies of himself at other locations when he's destroyed. In combination with cards like Shuri and Forge, Nimrod can give our turn 6 Galactus location up to 20 additional power. I thought Nimrod alone was a promising enough prospect for a turn 6 Galactus deck, but the Wolverine change has completely convinced me that turn 6 Galactus is the future. Goblins, Shuri, and Nimrod might not have been enough that strategy was consistent enough, but Wolverine can get up to 6 power with no additional effects other than Galactus, because Galactus destroys the locations one by one, so without even playing any other cards, Galactus himself could destroy Wolverine twice, making him a 6 power card just for 2 energy that always ends up in your Galactus location. That's no joke. And the nice thing about Nimrod and Wolverine is they don't clash with each other or have anti-synergy at all. We can play both of them in the same game and have exactly enough slots to summon every single one of those cards. Nimrod creates 2 copies of himself at the final Galactus location, Wolverine creates 1, and then Galactus himself, that's exactly the 4 cards we need to put in that final location. Even just those cards alone results in 16 to 18 power at the final Galactus locations. That's without factoring in any external effects like Shuri, Forge, the Goblins on the opponent's side of the field. A very, very legitimate turn 6 Galactus strategy is starting to form here. I've been talking very positively about this strategy, so let me address some of the potential issues. Number 1 is that very early on in the game, we communicate to the opponent where we want to play Galactus. That is a legitimate downside. If they play Cosmo on that location, we're in a rough spot. We now have to adapt and start playing in other locations. Issue number 2 is we need another way to close out games. Because of how transparent our strategy is, the opponent can predict how much power we're going to be able to put onto the board, so we need a way to quote-unquote mix up the opponent. If they're expecting Galactus, we need to be able to play something else in return. I think the answer to both of these problems is Destroyer. Let's say our board state is Wolverine, Nimrod, and the opponent's expecting us to Galactus on the right location. If instead we play Destroyer on the left location, we had 5 power to every other location, and then a Wolverine which summons himself to be 4 power at one of the locations. Hopefully the Destroyer is enough to win left, and between the goblins that we give the opponent, hopefully we're able to swing the game just with that 16-5-5, and then wherever Wolverine lands +4 strategy. Again, none of that's factoring in potential Forge procs or Shuri procs. I've put together a quick example of what this deck would look like, so here it is. We run Nova, Forge, Wolverine, Green Goblin, Juggernaut, Shuri, Hobgoblin, Kang, Magic, Nimrod, Galactus, and Destroyer. We run Juggernaut as a way to put more cards onto the opponent's final location, or at least disrupt them in some way. What we might end up doing, and it's hard to playtest this because we really can't play this deck right now without Nimrod. Nimrod absolutely makes this deck possible, which is why I don't suggest running Wolverine for now in your Galactus decks. But it's possible we just run one ramp card over the Juggernaut. That way we have an alternative way to close out the game. If we play our goblins onto the right location and then the opponent destroys them with like a Carnage or something, if we then Psylocke on turn 4, just having the alternative way to close out the game could be useful. The only problem with switching out Juggernaut for a ramp card is that we don't have a reason to play a ramp card other than playing Galactus. So I really don't want to run a ramp card in this deck, so if I can avoid that, I'd like to do that. I talked about Kang a little bit in my video earlier in the week, but if I understand the functionality of Kang correctly, which is a big if, I guess, I think he's more or less an auto-include in almost every Galactus list. I would highly recommend not playing a list like this until we get Nimrod. Turn 6 Galactus is very, very weak without Nimrod, but you can definitely win some games if you want to get some practice in understanding the play pattern. So just take this list and then switch out a few cards and see what you think. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video at all, be sure to leave a like. It helps me out a bunch. Keep being awesome, and I'll catch you around.